Hey everybody, welcome to Barsha Barsha Barsha. We have a great show today. This is really exciting. It is the 25th of July, 2022. And we're going to have a fantastic guest in a minute here. Hi, Charlotte. I'm welcoming my audience. Of course, I want you all to know this is the Wait Bot music. Thank you, Charlotte. Fireside has a Wait Bot. It looks like Frank Sinatra with avatar glasses on. That's how we know that the Wait Bot is here and ready for us. If anybody wants to broadcast to the world, please look at the two little lines on the lower left. Share with your anyone you want. And please, please, please know that we are very excited to see you today. And we are going to start shortly. You can broadcast to the world by hitting those two little white lines at the bottom, or as we affectionately call them, the hamburger. So, yes. Here is my guest, my lovely guest. Charlotte, thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to start really soon. This is Barsha Barsha Barsha. Today, as I said before, is 5 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time on the 25th of July. Okay. That's like hero music. Okay, here we are at Barsha Barsha Barsha. I sing my guest all the time, a little number for them. So I am going to make this no different from any other time. Where do you go on Mondays when you want to have fun? Where can you go on Mondays when your day is done? Well, Fireside Chat is where it's at. Our guests are all the best. Now there's slivers, quivers, takers and givers. She's one of the givers. Faith Jones Rivers. Join me in welcoming Faith Jones Rivers. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That was amazing.
Thank you so much. And those of you who aren't in this show will see this on the replay. But I just wanted to say that, first of all, can I please thank you for doing this today. I have done a deep dive on faith, and I'm going to start out at the beginning. Believe it or not, at the beginning. Let me give you a proper intro first. You were born and raised in Westchester, I think specifically Peekskill, but we'll talk if that's not true, in Westchester. And you currently live there. You are the head of a professional stylist, head of professional stylist education with Diva Curl, which is a brand dedicating to supporting people who, get ready, who want to celebrate, this is from Faith's mouth, their unapologetic authenticity. And she is an activist in her daily life. She uses her Buddhist practice to speak out against injustice and to find a sense of mission within life's realities. Can we get applause? Okay.
Yes, that was amazing. I'm going to take you with me to introduce me everywhere.
Because, you know what? Here's what I said to people who were asking me about you and when I promoted you, and this is why I'm starting at the beginning. I said, she's a Buddhist activist. Now, usually with Buddhism, you associate it with passivism maybe in a certain way. Can you explain that juxtaposition of Buddhism and activism, especially with your practice?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll share a little bit about why I personally identify in that way in the context of Buddhism, because, frankly, in our practice of Buddhism, which is Nichiren Buddhism, people practice or they engage with their environment as they are. And so for myself, I have this fortune of being very concerned with humanity, society, and I also have a lot of anger inside of my life. And so this practice, which consists of chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, allows me to take that anger and not like water it down, not even put out this fire. It allows me to change that anger into passion. And I'm always getting the angriest about, injustice and inequities and things in society. So that's why I define myself as an activist. Through my Buddhist practice, I'm able to
Right.
take that anger and change it.
Right. And when I called the show The Broadway Buddhist, it's because I try to do that in my environment too. And so that's why you've known me through various shows that I've done, and we practice this Buddhism at the same time. I thought it would be really good to see that everybody can apply this practice to their lives. And Faith, you and I both know it's not about getting rid of your earthly desires or becoming more holy. It's like, this is revolutionary. Tell me what you think of this. We are a Buddha exactly the way we are, but we just have to wake up to it.
Yeah.
That is different, would you say, from other Buddhist practices, right?
I'd say so. I mean, I researched and have participated in many different types of practices and religions and beliefs. And, this, what drew me to this was that I didn't have to, it wasn't about like you said, like getting rid of my desires or like doing all of these things to somehow one day feel like maybe am I enlightened? Like, am I enlightened yet? This totally teaches that, I have that within me already. And like you said, I have to become awake to it, which I do on a daily basis. So it's not even long. Doesn't even have a longevity to it. It's like, if I chanted this morning, I was awakened to my enlightenment or my Buddhahood then, and I was able to do that all day. And then, maybe this evening I'll have to chant again, to awaken to that, enlightened nature that we all have access to.
Right. And I think that's what, always blew me away about you, because you had this perspective at one point during the pandemic. I remember calling you. I don't know if you remember this. And I said, how are you dealing from a Buddhist perspective with George Floyd? How are you dealing with the pandemic? Do you remember what you said, or can you say what you would say now even? Because I
Yeah,
remember.
I think what I did, because I started practicing in 2013, and so I've had a bunch of instances where I was able to see, okay, how can I go from being this hopeless person, and feeling powerless as well. And so I've proven that to myself, quite a lot over the years. And so because I have that training or that habit in my life already, when this happened, and I actually watched the full video of George Floyd's murder, I was just overcome again with this feeling, just complicated feelings of anger. And then also, scrolling through my social media feeds, quite taken aback by everyone's shock and, well, not everyone, taken aback by the shock from people who did not believe that it was this bad, did not believe that, that Black men in this country were treated like this by the police more
Right.
often than not. And so that was so complicated for me. And so I went right to, my altar to chant because I just didn't know what to do. And from that standpoint, processing how I really just felt like, oh, I'm so upset about this, or what am I going to do? And then reaching out to some friends in my life, of course, Buddhist as well, and
Right.
understanding that, I have to be honest with how I feel, one, but two, what can I do? Like, what is my personal responsibility at this time to create something in my sphere of influence? And so I
Right.
think, at least, I don't know if this happens to you, but I can feel so small when something so big happens. Like, I'm only one person, like, what can I do?
That's why I'm
On top
asking.
of, right.
Yeah, the concept of. I just really want to have a dialogue about this, because keep going, and then I'm gonna ask you another question
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. So going from feeling small to like chanting, and like, as I'm bringing out like this, and when we chant as well, it also brings out, um, courage, compassion, and wisdom. So the wisdom to understand, okay, what is it that I need to do next? Like, what's the next? Glennon Doyle calls it the next right thing. She always talks about, oh, what's the next right thing for me to do? And then, the compassion to understand that for me, it was that, well, not everyone has seen this, and not every, even though maybe we've told that every other people, like maybe they have not. This is the time. And then the compassion to embrace people, which, my tendency is to just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm just going to go in my room and never come out. Then the courage to use my voice. And so that actually, I think, was the biggest thing. Like, being able to consistently chant, to be able to find my voice and to use it, is the activism piece for me. And it also prevents me from feeling powerless. And then I can cause a community of people to take action together. Didn't know what it looks like. We don't always know what it looks like.
Right.
But to be able to be community minded at a time where divisiveness is so like just taking over,
Yeah.
I think that was key for me. And that's how I could find, the thing I was supposed to be doing at that time.
And do you think part of it has to do in our practice where we're not chanting to something outside of ourselves? We're chanting to bring up the enlightened nature of whatever state we're in. So enlightened inherent in your anger, your passion, is an enlightened way to bring about change, right? Through and not deny that you're anything. It's all part of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, I just want to ask you your opinion on, you said I was feeling angry and powerless. How did that metamorphosis take place for you to go? I mean, when you chanted, one of the great things is we take action after we chant, or we at least know what not to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, reflecting on that exact day, the first thing I did after I was chanting was to check on my family. I had to really be honest with, like, I don't think about a lot of realities in the world on a consistent daily basis. I think that would drive me just to be constantly depressed. But on that day, the first thing I did after I chanted was to call my dad. Specifically, he drives into work. He works in the television news business in the morning news, and he drives to work every morning very early before it's light out. And I always am concerned, like, man, here's an older Black man driving down to New York City from Westchester, and I'm always concerned, like, what if he gets pulled over? And so I addressed my like immediate family first, and then I started talking to some coworkers and having honest conversation, because these are things, especially when we talk about things like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, these things. I think those of us who want to change something or see something that's clearly unjust, it feels very difficult to bring it up because you don't want to rock the boat, or you don't want to hurt feelings, or even in a work setting, well, is this entirely appropriate to bring this up at work? And I decided, and I did this a lot, I decide that when I bring up something at work, I'm like, you know what, it's more important for me to bring this up so we can address it. And you know what, if I get let go, I'll get let go. And that would never happen. Like, that would never happen to me, where I am. But that is a real concern and a real fear. Like, how can I bring up this thing that we're afraid to talk about? And that's how I was able to immediately address it. And it has snowballed since in a really good way.
Right. And I feel kind of guilty that I just dove right in, but you are that kind of person that I feel can kind of be myself with, warts and all, and you'll correct me if I make a mistake.
I was encouraged by how you dove in. That is like, I thought it was great. I was like, this is amazing. It took me a few to get there, but I was encouraged.
Yeah, I mean, you've always been like that, and you've always told me, I ask you honestly, am I being overly woke? Am I being obnoxious? And you'll tell me, because first of all, the line of work that you're in, I'm unfamiliar with, and I have learned from this whole period of time, it's not your job to educate me about anything. That's the big thing that I've learned. But you always educate me about Buddhism, and I've been practicing 34 years. You've been practicing how many years?
So I've been practicing for about 9 years now.
And your wisdom of what has happened to you. I would love people to know how you came to Buddhism. Can you please tell them? Because you came from a sense of skepticism, right? Which, of course, everyone would. Not everybody's born a Buddhist, right?
Yeah, I actually am still very skeptical. I'm a very skeptical person. I'm always that kind of person where I'm like, let's look behind the frame. Like, what's behind this, like, painting or whatever? That's like how I walk this earth. So I, it's kind of a funny story. So I learned about Buddhism from the person I was dating at the time, and he saw that, you know, I he saw this I had this lack of patience that I had, and he was like, you should really try chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. It's Buddhism, and I was like, I know about Buddhism. Like, it's fine. I'm good. I don't need it. But like, I'm happy that that's for you. I'm like, but are you sure you were Buddhist? Because you're not vegan. Like, I don't get it. You do not have to be a vegan or a vegetarian to be a Buddhist. But like, I was like sharing that to show like my stereotypes, and I was just so sure of like these ideas I had about Buddhism.
Right.
And I did not go to a meeting. So we practice Buddhism with an organization here in the U.S. called SGI USA.
Soka Gakkai
everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
Yes.
It means value creating society, right?
And yes, it does. And the only reason why I went to a meeting is because he went to a meeting and came back. He left in a very bad mood and came back very happy and joyful. And my two there, like, who is she? What's her name? And so I immediately I initially went to investigate who this girl he could have been talking to or met. That's where I was at the time with my mindset. But what I immediately noticed, one was the level of diversity in this room, not only ethnic, but age diversity, just every kind of person in this room practicing a specific religion, Buddhism. And I was like, this is interesting. And the second thing I was really interested in was, the emphasis, this particular meeting I went to, the president of the Soka Gakkai, Daisaku Ikeda, was on a video, and he was talking about nuclear abolition.
Right.
And I had never heard a religious leader speak about being anti-war, anti-anything, except for just talking about the religion itself.
Mm.
So I was curious by that. And so I kept being curious. And I feel like today, 9 years later, I still practice because through my curiosity, there's not been any aspect of my life where I cannot shift or change, based on this idea that I can transform anything once I bring out my enlightenment, bring out my enlightened nature.
Yes. And in our practice, there's a thing called poison into medicine, which is Handoku Iyaku. And it's exactly that. Taking the poison in your life, chanting and transforming it, not trying to get rid of it, not trying to pretend it's not there, feeling it, enlightening it, and knowing what to do next or not to do. And I love that about you. You actually, there was a quote I listened to. We have a couple of publications in our organization, the World Tribune and Living Buddhism. And we have this amazing website called Buddhability. What is it? Buddhability.com? Is that what it is?
.org.
.org. I'm so sorry. Mm-hmm. Buddhability.org. Faith did an incredible interview. And one of the things you said was when you walked into the room, it was the first time you saw equality, equity, and justice combined with religious practice.
Yes.
Me too. When I walked into the Culture Center in New York City, I said, whoa, everyone's here. Everyone's here. So you had a whole interview too that I read about where you said you had one of your what we call fundamental darkness, maybe, or something that you have karma with and you don't think you can change, right? Was defining your self-worth through other people and through your environment. How has that changed through chanting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't ever remember a time not seeking validation from my environment for a number of reasons. Through things like therapy and understanding history and different things, I've been able to identify some practical reasons why I became that way. And when I say, validation, I mean anything big or small. like maybe I shouldn't, change my job. Like, I'm not really sure. Like, let me like wait for a sign. I need a sign kind of thing. Or, that could be as small and daily as like, should I wear this outfit? Like, I don't know. Like, let me like ask someone else. Like, I can never take an action or find any kind of self-esteem or self-confidence without a reaction from something or someone in my environment.
Right.
And this makes me suffer because, that means that I'm really depending on someone else for my happiness. Like, how does someone else know what's good for me? They don't know. Only I know. But if I don't have the courage to tap into that, to make a decision, or like, what if I'm wrong, or what if it goes terribly, or all those things, like, it doesn't matter. Like, ultimately, I have the power to make my own decision. And so that is still the case, honestly. Like, I have not like ripped out this tendency to seek out validation. But
Right.
what I've been able to do is to really kind of amplify being able to find that validation within my own life, or use it again in a positive way. Like, instead of seeking out validation from others, maybe that makes me a really, really great at group projects, or a really good collaborator, or really great at like having vulnerability and sharing with someone. But that's kind of the higher self way, instead of going based on my lesser self, which is like, I don't matter unless someone tells me I matter.
Right. But for you to flag that, this
Yeah,
is the kind of thing that chanting brings up. It's like
yeah.
to take responsibility for everything in your life, not just I'm going to take a I'll clean up my side of the street and the other person, no, this is what's different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's to me the revolutionary part. Because for
Right.
me, as I always joke around that I was born into this lifetime with like all of these otherisms in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I'm clearly, visibly a Black woman, um, but I identify as queer, and I'm a lefty, and I was raised a vegetarian, like all of these non-mainstream things in my life. And
Right.
so, but then also to have the thing where I need a validation and purpose from other people, it doesn't match. Like, when you're not a mainstream, when you're not a mainstream person, it doesn't really make sense to seek this extra validation, outside validation, because you're kind of by yourself.
Right.
Um, and so being able to have a daily practice where I can say, you know what, like, I'm gonna unite with others and
Right.
create a space where everyone feels embraced. I think that's the benefit of taking full responsibility, because for every person, for me to feel that way or to have that challenge in life, there's someone else. Um,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
that's, to me, is like another activism aspect
Right.
of this
I love
practice.
this Buddhist activism. Don't you love that, everybody? It's and that is. Can you explain? I'm sorry. I don't mean to be doing like. I'm going all around because you look at things through the lens of Buddhism, as I do, but I don't necessarily talk about it. I just have that point of view because I'm so used to putting on those glasses and looking at everything that way. But your business, your work. I was looking at what you do for Diva Curl. That's the name of it, Diva Curl, correct? And
Yes.
it's there was an episode called Race, Gender, and Hair. Whoa. I don't know if white people have that. I mean, I'm making a joke. Please, you know who I am, Faith. Is that okay that I made a joke?
Listen, I think it's a great question, and it's also funny, because I think
It
life's
is
funny in
funny,
that way.
but I want to take it seriously
Yeah.
because I learned so much by watching your company, and your company is there were a lot of concepts I want to get into. Okay. So I want to get right into the race thing real quick. It was a quote that people align themselves with whiteness by straightening their hair. Right. Now, with your lens of Buddhism and teaching people that their hair is okay, I'm serious about this now. Can you give me the philosophy of your company and what you do there?
Yes. I'm just taking notes. I also have ADHD, so if I get too far ahead in my brain, I'll
Got
forget
it.
what I'm going to say.
And
So
also
thank you so much.
stop me if I'm overstepping, but I find this.
No. This is a great line of questioning. So for context, I am a hairstylist by trade. I do work in a department called education for a beauty brand, like Deborah said. It's called Diva Curl, the name of it. And we just launched a series on YouTube called our Pro Artist Series. And so the premise of the brand, upon its founding, was to really create products and also a cutting technique and a hair coloring technique to provide a service and an experience for people with curly hair. So period, and curly hair, right? And so over time, there's been many different, I want to say, things that have come up, for the brand. And I'm speaking, as someone who's worked in the professional hairstylist, side of the business, that if you are talking to someone about their hair, you're talking to them about like a broader experience of what their life is like. Like,
Yes.
It's not just about what are we doing to your hair today? It's that, what do you do for work? How early do you wake up? How often do you want to style your hair? Like all these different questions. And then when you talk to someone about the texture of their hair or the shape that their hair makes, there's all kinds of heavy stuff that can be around it, And I became a hairstylist after college because I had chemically straightened my hair my entire life. After college, I cut my hair off and now my hair was growing out naturally. And with that, I walked into the store and I'm like, what products do I even buy? I never saw my hair like this. And, and so I recognized as a person having going through my personal experience that, oh, wow, this is something. Like, in order for me to increase self-confidence and help others do that, like, hair is a place where I can potentially do that. And so I became a hairstylist. And so when we have this conversation of, how do you care for your hair? When you're talking to people with different hair textures, it could be about, well, my grandmother, styled my hair for me every Saturday night, the night before church or something like that.
Right.
And automatically that brings up thoughts and feelings about family and, about what was my space in the family, right? And so for people, oftentimes, I won't say every single time, I don't like to make blanket statements, but, more often than not, when you talk to someone with tighter hair textures, like from curly all the way onto coily, there's some kind of idea that they were, society has indoctrinated them with this idea that, if my hair is not like this, then I cannot possibly attain beauty. Beauty is unattainable. So now I'm set up to spend blank dollars and spend X amount of time attaining this beauty ideal. But then when you rewind, it's like, well, who dictates these beauty ideals?
Right.
Like, sure, society, right? But society is made up of people. And so our policies are made by people, right? And so how do we start to, break down this idea? And I was talking today in one of our meetings, believe it or not, in one of our meetings today, we were talking about, actually to be told that you have to straighten your hair in order to be beautiful. That is some kind of anti-Blackness in your life, regardless of what your race even is. So even if you're, forgive me, I hope this is okay, but if you're a white lady if you're a white lady with curly hair, believe it or not, if you were forced to straighten your hair, that idea, that indoctrination, that idea comes from a form of anti-Blackness or a form of racism. Right. And so, it takes a lot for a lot of people to interrogate themselves to get to that point. And I'm not saying this is all the case, right? I personally love to sometimes blow my hair out, wear it straight, but why? Am I doing it because I'm ugly if I don't? Versus if I want to have a fun hairstyle, by all means, do whatever. But what's the reason?
See, this is what first of all, I felt weird even asking the question because I know this is a very touchy subject, but you work in this realm and that is why I asked it. Okay. And
I love this question.
Okay. Because I watched the shows you asked me to watch, which you produced. By the way, you produced those Diva Curl episodes, correct? Yes.
They were kind of an accident, but yes, my friends in that series, were just having a beautiful conversation, and we just rolled camera, and created a
Right.
series from it because it was such an important conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a whole queer black aspect to it too. And I want to get into that as your identity. You identify as queer. And I asked you ahead of time, can I ask you your story about who you're married to and
Yes.
the fact that your husband is a trans man.
Mm-hmm.
And are you, I know probably labels are not cool for you, but you identify as queer just to be, because that's what you are, right? I mean, what are labels to you and what are they not to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I ask myself this question a lot. I think I can appreciate, quote unquote labels in some ways because it helps us to identify community.
Yep.
And I think community is very important.
Right.
Um, and we do it, we're very, humans like to find people who are like them. It's a very human psychology thing that we do. So
Yes.
I like labels for that reasons. For example, for Pride Month, like I don't want anyone to think I'm not celebrating Pride Month in June. Like I will be wearing all the rainbows.
Yes.
But when my husband came out as or when he brought others in, that's what I like to say. Or he likes to say too, like bringing others into his true identity.
I got to give you that. That's great. Wow. I never heard that.
I think bringing people in is, anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. But when he brought others in, including myself, into his, true identity, um, this is another aspect that I realized how I validate myself by someone else. So it's like, if I identify as queer, how can I possibly do that if we're going to now present as a cis hetero couple or a
Did you
straight
feel
couple?
invisible like I did when my huswife came out as non-binary transmasculine? I felt, oh my God, I'm going to be invisible again.
Yep. Yeah. And I worked very hard to be out of this proverbial closet, right? And to now,
Right.
and I also present as like I wear makeup, I wear hair extensions. So, presenting as femme, I don't look queer or gay, right? And so, how can I let my people know they're my people?
Right.
And that was a lot. And that was also part of like, how can I celebrate myself? Or how do I not depend on someone else to make me feel seen? And when you put it that way, it's like, like that's not what we should be doing.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's very important. That goes with everything. Yes. I love that you were introduced by your husband and then you were skeptical. You saw that it was a good thing. And then your husband says, and by the way, I'm going to transition. So you got hit with these, as we say, things right away that you had to discover about yourself and not the other woman. The other part of you that didn't, maybe want to be with a man. I
Well,
mean,
what's interesting is that
yeah,
that's
what
another
happened?
interesting
Yeah.
piece.
Wait, am I going too far?
No, the other interesting piece is that, again, everything's under this umbrella of these limitations I put on myself based on, validation.
Okay.
I think for some reason, everything come back to that because at the end of the day, the reasons I had decided, I actually never actively decided that I wasn't attracted to men. I decided that I wasn't attracted to a certain way that society teaches men to be.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I was like, you know what? Maybe one day I'll meet the perfect man, but there's a lot more women who fit the perfect partner idea for me. So I'm done with this side of the gender spectrum. I'm going to go to that side of the gender spectrum. And, it turns out that, I was able to identify the attributes I was not attracted to instead of putting a gender in a box.
Exactly. That's beautifully said.
And that that was a process for me. I had to really self-reflect.
Yeah.
I had to really self-reflect on that for myself.
Yeah, I'm very similar. There wasn't a word. I'm a lot older than you, so there wasn't a word. So I said bisexual, but it really wasn't right. And now I realize, that I'm queer. It's such a great word, and that really worked for me. So with Buddhism, I have to say to everybody that doesn't know this, the SGI organization, which we have, actually has a conference for LGBTQIA plus people down at this
Yes.
culture center in Florida. I mean, we are embraced. It took a long time, but this organization is dedicated to embracing everybody with equality, And so it's just mind blowing to me. And I went to one of those conferences, and through the lens of Buddhism, equality in our community and with the world and society is pretty amazing. So I want to just take you back to like your childhood for a minute. Did you have any sense of a philosophy or a belief? Were you raised anyway?
Yeah, so I actually have been reflecting on this quite a lot in the past couple of weeks. My grandmother passed recently, and
I know, I'm
I've
so
been really
sorry.
reflecting. Yeah, thank you so much. She lived a very long and fulfilled life. I'm actually so moved by her life. Something I've been reflecting on, though, is what does it mean to be brought up in a family where you have a foundation of respect for yourself and others, and really thinking about deeper things like, okay, how am I doing harm unto others unnecessarily?
Right.
That's one example. Or what is the thing I should keep in mind when I'm in a group of friends?
Right.
And I was so over it when I was in middle school or like high school, like you're ruining my life, like I just want to be cool with my friends.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
being out in society, being out in the world, not everyone has this opportunity to have like this kind of foundation, um where like, okay, how can I like be the one in my workplace, in my home, in my neighborhood, to have to be in that kind of leadership role? It's not in a
Mm,
leadership in a kind of hierarchical way, but it's like, how do I do the right thing that's community minded and not just for myself? you
right.
know, and always keeping in mind the community. And not only were my parents like this, but both of my grandmothers were like this. One of my grandmothers was a teacher, and the other one was also a teacher, but and also a nurse.
Right.
And so I just have this great foundation of understanding, the value and importance of community, and that what I do affects someone else. It's not
Right.
ever about only me.
Right. That's a Buddhist concept too, dependent origination.
Yes,
It's like nothing exists in isolation and
right.
independent of other life forms. And that's why personal security can't be established in isolation. Like we
Yep.
need each other, that we're mirrors for each other, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and so even though I found Buddhism later on in life, I was 26, having that foundation, I think, helped me really, even though I had quite a few struggles, I still recognize that whatever I'm doing, it cannot be just made, it's not only about me, ever.
Right. But it is responsibility for everything that happens in your environment. And
Yes.
whether yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was 28, when I started practicing, I thought, yeah, that's one of the things that appealed to me, practice for oneself and practice for others. I mean, that was really kind of revolutionary to me at the time. I didn't want something that was just self-serving, but I wanted that sense of, how can I put it? Like, bring it on. I can fight
Mm,
it. I have a practice in my life. Bring it on. Because obstacles
hmm.
equal benefits, right? In our practice. So now when an obstacle comes up, my default is not to say, oh my God, maybe my personality is. My personality is like, what are we going to do? But then I'm like, oh, I got to sit down and chat. Right. That's so true. I can't believe it. Um,
Can I ask you a
so,
question, Deborah?
oh, you're going to ask me a
Can I
question?
ask you one? I just thought of one based on what you just
Okay.
shared. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Listen, We're here to have a dialogue about Buddhism and how you apply it to your life. That's what the show is called.
I went to journalism school, so I have a lot of questions in general in life.
Okay.
But,
All right, okay.
do you think we were talking about community before?
Yes.
And we both agree that, being community minded is very important. Do you feel that being in the LGBTQ community or the queer community for as long as you have been, do you feel that that has increased your awareness of the importance of community? Because not everyone feels that way.
Absolutely. And the reason is when I started practicing in 1987, people were still dying of AIDS. So I always had a sense of community in that way. And I lost friends. I lived through that. I chanted through that. It was really intense. And I used my practice a lot during that time. Also, I'll speak very candidly, which I don't usually do, but I will. I used to put my joints on the altar and my alcohol. I was very, and I used to chant, to offer them to myself. And what happened 2 years later, I ended up in AA because I enlightened myself to the fact that I had a problem. You know what I'm saying? Because there I was, there I was, And so that also created community in my life because I have the recovery community, I have the Buddhist community, and at one point there was a bunch of Buddhists also that were in recovery that we had a little thing. Also, I at certain points in my life I was like a leader in the organization, and I really feel like the mission of the leaders in this organization, which is so beautiful, is to really encourage the new members to chant and be happy, not just the happiness that they might have defined themselves as, but like where you're like smiling all the time, but like the absolute confidence that you can overcome anything. And whenever you're asking anybody in your environment to go for that, I feel like you're encouraging them to be independent and not dependent. And so you foster a sense. Yeah. I mean, but what do you feel about the question you asked me? Is that how you feel about our practice and community in that way?
I feel like I just have always been very community driven. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a Gemini. I don't know the reason, but I always like, thinking about how can community from, many different grassroots movements started in a community, just a community conversation. And then also,
Yes.
I think there's things in society that are just so unfortunate because the society is not community based. And so one thing I've always talked to one of my
Right.
closest friends about is, how astounding it is, for example, to be a new mom and society says you do that. Our society says you do that on your own, for a couple of months and you go back to work apparently. And if you look at that from, looking at indigenous communities and also communities around the world, like we're the only ones who force new mothers to be alone with a new child. And it's just not, it's very, very concerning to me.
There's
These are things
the
that keep me up
Buddhist
at night, Deborah.
activists. The Buddhist activists, everyone. Yes.
I just think we're so much better in communities than by ourselves because we're humans.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I want to talk about people. Well, first of all, is it okay if we do a little Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. Some people are writing in the in there that they want to come up to the stage. So I'm going to bring people up and maybe can ask questions. And Deanna, welcome. Do you want to be on camera or stay off?
Oh, no. You know me and Mondays. This is a rough day for me on camera.
Okay. Deanna has her own show, which is called Laughter After Trauma, which is an incredible show. But go ahead, Deanna.
So, Faith, I wanted to say that something that you said, and I commented on it, I think in the comments, was the part that you talk about being able to give back to community, being an example, and your grandmother and the way you were raised, even though maybe it wasn't Buddhist, you didn't really specifically say, but the way you were raised fostered with you the fact that you had to sort of be an example, pay it forward, carry that legacy, perpetuate that legacy. And so, like, for me, this was a really important thing. My family was very religiously divided when I grew up. My immediate family took on a belief that was very different than my grandparents. And so it kind of caused this division, yet they were still both very accepting. My grandparents, it took a minute to come to terms, but my grandparents and then my mother were very able to be accepting, and I think that's the word, accepting. So I'm wondering, how do you, when you're creating these communities, because you talk about the LGBTQ community, which I am not, I don't identify as that, but I do feel like I'm part of the community. So you see what I'm saying? So how does that work? Because you also don't want to be exclusionary. So tell me, how does that work?
Through the lens of Buddhism, but go ahead, Faith.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what's interesting is that humans, although we want to be, this is literally my opinion and my experience. This is not like some kind of like educational definition, but from my experience, I feel that humans will do anything to think of differences between people. And I think that is what causes so much divisiveness. And, I think for what I personally noticed is that for however many differences I can come up with between myself and another person, if I fight hard enough, if I want to hard enough, if I have brought out that compassion, wisdom, and courage from my life, for me, it's chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, I can find one thing that can connect. And from there can be a way forward. And, if I heard myself saying that 15 years ago, I'd have been like, are you kidding me? You're such a Pollyanna. Like, what's wrong with you? That's not how life works. And, I also would tell my past self, I understand why you feel that way. Because when you're in a body that is not, the mainstream body, or, if you, like you said, if you have parents in an environment that, does not embrace every person or even you, why should you seek to find a solution or find a connection? But what's interesting is that another word for person who seeks to find unity, or person who seeks to build bridges, is another word for that kind of person is also a Buddha. A Buddha is always a Buddha is always someone who is always seeking to build bridges and unity through dialogue. And so, that's how I personally do it. And it looks different in a bunch of different ways. It can be, on a global scale, what really is the reason why there's a divide, for example, between two countries? Is it really because of the people, or is who like, what's the capital gain? Like, what's the, financial blah, blah, blah. What's the reason, right? Or even if you look at, phenomenons in society, such as this colonial tool of racism was literally created to divide people. And so, but why? If people work together, they can overthrow a government, or they can overthrow, divisiveness and things like this, right? But if we keep people separate, they'll have their separate ideas and their separate, values, and then continue to be divisive. And so, I do think it takes some effort. I think it does take a lot of self-interrogation, self-reflection, some unpacking. And then the other side of that is like, going back to this self-validation piece, like, do I really need everyone to accept everything I'm doing? Or do I really need that or this or that person to like me that much? I don't.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, yeah. So the thing, it does, acceptance it doesn't have to be two-sided. So I get that. You can be accepting, and even if that other person doesn't accept you, that's kind of not your problem. I get that. Like, you can't, like you said, you can't make everybody like you, or whatever. You don't need that kind of validation, as you put it. I do also think and believe, and one of the things that I talk about in the trauma room is that we are fundamentally way more alike than we are different. regardless of all these labels. If you throw the labels out on a base
Right.
level, we want fulfillment and purpose in life. We want to have inner peace. We want to prosper. We want to be able to have roofs over our head and raise our families and whatever. And all of those things are just fundamental things that I think every human being wants. I think, like you said, that there are factions out there that try to cause division, and those divisions are set up so that we don't unite, that we don't
Sure.
overcome, and that's in place because of people who crave power. I do think that if we get just enough people to come together like this, like we are here, having a conversation, right? Like I did with Mr. Blunt, who we talked about, systemic racism, and he wrote a book on this, and just opening the conversations and being able to talk. Me being a straight person, being able to say, you know what, I'm straight, but I feel like I'm part of the LGBTQ community because I have a lot of people in my life and I love them. They're relatives, they're friends. And, and so it's just saying that, we are much more alike than we are different. And so I appreciate the fact that that is something that this community here, Deborah brings it together. I try to bring it together to perpetuate that belief and that push it out in the world. I think if we get enough people, grassroots won't be grassroots anymore. They'll be, forests, tree roots. There you go.
Yes. No, I really appreciate what you're sharing. I do think, I like I was sharing with Deborah earlier, I do think identities and things that we refer to as labels, I do think they are important. So what's amazing, another cool thing that I've learned through Buddhism is this concept of a way that I think about people that really holds space and embraces everyone's individuality and also embraces similarities too. And so, I think I don't really think it would really be that much value creating if I sat here and said, me and Deborah are exactly the same. Like we have way more things in common than we have different. When we talk to each other, we do. And also we, of course, probably have very similar experiences as queer women. But I think the intersectionality and the ability to hold space for that is something I love about Deborah, is because Deborah always is like, Faith, is this a Black thing? Like, what is it? Well, I'm like, listen, let's talk about it. And so that's I think that's important is what I'm trying to say. Because, even though we know on the inside that we have a lot of similarities, I think it's very important to hold space for different identities because there are privileges and disadvantages that we have because of identities as well.
100%. So I'm not negating identities. I'm sorry, Deborah. I'm not negating identities. I'm just saying that on a base level, there's one thing. What we've dealt with as a culture and society, that's where those identities come in, I think. And when we can talk and have this kind of conversation, I mean, I've actually had the conversation of privilege. I am a white, straight woman. I guess the one thing I have going, against me could be said, oh, I'm a woman, right? But, I get the privilege. I do get the privilege. I understand it intellectually. But the conversations, that helps me understand it a whole lot further. So I appreciate that. I appreciate how you appreciate identities. I do agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deanna. And I always end on time. So I just do you want to say something else too, Deanna? Because we have Anthony on stage too. Would you like to respond, Faith?
Oh, no, okay, I was going to say thank you for, it was nice to meet you today, Deanna. Thank you for what you shared.
Thanks, Deanna. I love when we have these dialogues, I learned a lot from my show, which is about Tina Turner chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to get out of a situation that she couldn't get out of. Anthony, before we speak, I have scrolled Nam-myoho Renge Kyo going through like a ticker tape thing down there because I want people, I didn't even say what it meant. It means so much. But anyway, it's devotion to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound. Okay, just think about that. That's why a lot of musicians chant. Anthony, what's your question? Anthony? Anthony, here you go.
Okay, here we are. Deborah, You already know I love you.
Love you too, Anthony. If you want to come on camera, you can.
I just hopped out the shower and wanted to get
Okay.
in. I wanted to get in before you closed out the show.
Oh, I'm so happy. Go ahead, talk to Faith. Anthony,
And
they have a great show. Go ahead.
and Faith, oh, I love you so much. You cannot imagine. So, what triggered this call is something Deanna said, which is that we're all humans. We're really all humans. We came from the same place. We are all part of each other, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, and long lost cousins. We're all together in this. So when I look at someone, anyone, I'm looking to see who they are, just who they are, not what society has decided they are or the labels we have given them. I just want to know who they are. I want to feel them. I want to have love for them because we don't get anything done standing alone. Nothing. Nothing. This earth will never become a better place if we keep separating each other. So, I mean, I just love this conversation. I'm like going nuts over here. I'm like, these are my people. There's Deborah and Faith, my people. And for my entire life, it's been hard for me to find my people
Mm.
because it drives me crazy when, and I'm not trying to bring religion into it, but when churches hate people.
Mm.
You know, we see this every day. Churches hate people. The government hate people. If you are other, if you are not them, you're just on the outside. And it's crazy that they'll do everything in their power to destroy us when we haven't done anything.
Mm.
But just try to live our lives and love and be happy. We haven't done anything to anyone, but yet they keep trying to destroy all of us. If you talk about love, oh, that's a bad thing. We got to knock them down. Look, I see it's at 5 minutes to go. I'm going to shut my mouth, but I love you both, and we will be talking again. Love you.
Oh, Anthony, thank you. Faith, do you want to say anything to Anthony?
No, I really appreciate your perspective, Anthony. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, it
The
really
love is
was.
mutual. I appreciate you. Thank you.
And you're welcome. And I thank you for saying that because really, you are my people. We'll be seeing more of each other.
Thank you,
Love you.
Anthony. Love
All
you
right.
too.
Bye.
I'd want to say thank you, Anthony. And in the last 4 to 5 minutes here, if you had to tell someone what, it's a Buddhist lens, but it's common sense, right? I mean, Buddhism kind of is common sense. So, like, what can people do in their own environment, even? I mean, to just start being an activist, and it doesn't have to be a Buddhist activist, but something that will really change them from the inside out. I just want to drop in this concept we have in our form of Buddhism called human revolution, which is changing from the inside out. In light of human revolution, it's really a revolution in ourselves to transform ourselves and change our karma. Go ahead, Faith. How can people start? Besides chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, something I'm really always aware of, as far as issues. If the issue that we're passionate about is about climate change, if it's about, education, whatever, there's no shortage of nonsense and inequity and things that need to be fought against. I would say that because that's the case, there is always a local organization that is doing the thing that you are looking to do. And so I really, because going back to the point about community, there's someone else already out there who is organized and has a structure to fight against the thing that you want to fight against. And so if you don't know what it is, please ask anyone. Ask your elected officials, ask your neighbors, ask some teachers in your environment. There's something. Don't go out on your own and try to do the thing, because one, we don't know how to do it yet because we're learning. And then two, let's be a community wherever we can. I think it's really important.
Can we please have applause? I'm giving major applause to Faith Jones Rivers. I can't tell you. Yeah, see, people really love this. This is conversations we need to have here. And everybody that shared, everybody that stayed in the audience, anyone who passed through, anyone who's listening now on the replay, I just really want to thank you all, because these are the kinds of conversations I want to have. My 3 things I'm interested in on this Barsha, Barsha, Barsha. LGBTQ, I have On a Queer Day, which is one of my shows. My Buddhist shows, which is the Broadway Buddhist, which is me. And then also, backstage and lifting people up that aren't necessarily performers on a stage. So, and then I have my wild card show. So Faith, this was just amazing, amazing, amazing for you to come on. I just want to thank you again and again.
Thank you.
And
I really
everybody else. We will be back for Barsha, Barsha, Barsha next Monday at our normal time, 5 Eastern Standard.